Hey everybody, Ozark Elman here. So, that's right, Whoopi Goldberg on The View today. Not really even going to hear hardly a blurb of this outside Fox News. And by the way, even Fox News didn't put this on a video on their YouTube. Whoopi Goldberg asks if it's going to take seeing white people get beat up to see quote unquote change. In other words, to make people care. Now, she immediately clarified, now I'm not calling for that to happen to white people. Well, it's already happening, Whoopi, all the time. But she's suggesting if it would take this now, she thinks it's not happening, and it's not happening on a constant basis, and it is, then obviously it's because she's not seeing it in the news. And she's not seeing it in the news because it barely, if ever, gets covered. It's the day to day. It's the norm. And by the way, where she grows up, she knows that this is the norm. She knows better. In fact, let's even take a look at a couple headlines that you basically got to dig to find. This young woman, LSU student, was not just attacked and assaulted, and you know what I mean by assaulted, then she was killed. And take a wild guess at the demographic of all of her attackers. Even in this story, even the few stories you can find, good luck finding even a description, which is, by the way, deliberately omitted. You all know that. You all know why. And even just there in Memphis, by the way, which is what sparked this conversation, it was black officers that assaulted and beat up and led to the death of this guy, Tyree, black male. But again, the media is still blaming white people, calling it white supremacy. Who upholds that? Oh, the people who are privileged. Who's privileged? Well, us. Was she privileged? And by the way, 20,000 such cases a year, particularly with this type of assault, not murder, but this type of assault, a lot of murders, but of that demographic against this demographic. I'm guessing Whoopi doesn't know that. If she grew up, because this has been such a day-to-day problem for decades, I mean, the cops don't even get called. It's such a common occurrence for us in schools. As a common occurrence when I was a kid. The vast majority of that demographic attacking our demographic every day. At the minimum, if you were lucky, got your stuff stolen when it was sit down. But we aren't talking about that problem, can we? If we talk about that problem, then no, we can have our lives destroyed. We're talking about what happened to this young woman. By the way, just a couple months ago in Memphis, white woman very close to this description, assaulted, killed, also one of those statistics, by the same demographic. And maybe a little bit of attention here and there. And then, of course, anybody who even pointed it out, a Daily Wire commenter, she was a blonde woman matching this description. You see someone of your exact description that this constantly happening to over and over and over. She can't even go into a big city without fearing this might happen to her. And she was lambasted, and she was called racist, and she was called this and that. Basically, really just an anti-white slur. Now, Whoopi Goldberg got in trouble for just a slight criticism or the way she worded things around another demographic. And she was suspended off The View. But not a word about this. And meanwhile, by the way, all 5 of the police officers in this use of force incident are black against a black male. And this was perhaps an actual unjustified and unconstitutional use of force, beating the tar out of him after he was restrained and handcuffed. Very clear cut, with a black mayor of the city, a black female police chief, and again, over and over and over, the media still blaming white people. And why aren't there even so many white people out there? Well, because they were violently run out. Another perp a few months ago went around randomly shooting white people, filming it, live streaming it. A lot of people in the live stream were cheering it on. That's the state of the society that we're in, and the institutions and the media are so blatantly anti-white that Whoopi Goldberg can talk about suggesting, well, maybe if white people were getting beat up, people would care. It's not only happening on a daily basis, but far, far worse. The only reason it isn't happening more is because we were violently run out of the big cities. And then, by the way, we took the blame for it. We take the blame for it. And it never stops. And now, by the way, our border is being invaded by 5 million people from lands where there is no rule of law, where the cartels are the rule of law, where the saying is plata o plomo, silver or lead. In other words, you take the payoff or you catch lead. And that is far, far worse than the gang violence we're already dealing with in the cities that are too unsafe for us to even travel to, that our ancestors built. That again, we continue to take the blame for. When is enough enough? At the least, to demand representation. The demographics have been changed against us deliberately. They are in all. There's nowhere to go, by the way. All the Western countries have been flooded. Hungary and Poland are being called evil and racist and Nazis and everything else simply for keeping their native populations the native population and refusing to take mass migrants and refugees. Ireland is getting overrun against the will of 94% of the native Irish people there who fought for centuries for their own independence, and then this is happening to them by the EU. And what's Ireland's response to it? Oh, they're going to pass hate crime laws to imprison Irish who talk about speaking up on behalf of their own ethnicity against mass migration. In Britain, over 3,300 people have been jailed, who are all, by the way, every single one of them ethnic Brits, for making inappropriate social media posts that they call hate. That's right, for so-called hate speech online. When the vast majority of major British cities aren't even ethnically British anymore. You're not allowed, and same in America by different means. You're suppressed, and you're not allowed to speak up for your own people when this is what's happening. Something has got to change, and we've got to start actually talking about real things here. Because every political movement, everything that's predominantly about the issues negatively facing us, negatively impacting us, where it's deemed white supremacy. Go ahead, Google it. Look up any movement predominantly of white people for the interests of the impact us, not even in the name of us, is deemed white supremacy. Why do you think that is? And remember when Biden, as I covered on this channel before, said that the source of our strength is making us non-white, is getting rid of us. There's no question here that it's anti-white, it's anti-Western. And for goodness sake, you better start calling it what it is. Props to Mark Dice for at least, saying that. Maybe because he isn't owned by the Daily Wire, who acts as the ultimate gatekeeper for all this. And Fox News, who acts as the gatekeeper. What's Fox News' response? This is Fox News' response for how to deal with major issues. Transportation workers, truckers, forced pretty much out of existence in California. People especially run out. And they're talking about $5 million a pop reparations, of course, not to non-white residents, and not the minorities, of course, who may be more successful too. And racial discrimination in college admissions and jobs and everything, and they get rid of it in one way and then they do it in another way and call it equity. But of course, Fox News, got to pander to the people that aren't even going to vote for you. The Republican Party has never ever cared. Never mind all the white truckers and white male truckers who were put out of business before this. Oh no, we got to pander, playing the same chess game that the left is playing, that anti-white left is playing. The Republican Party never wanted the white working and middle class. When the Democrats, many, many decades ago, started making us the devils of civilization and the devils of history, when anytime diversity has had a negative impact on us, and we actually mention it, it's white supremacy. In order to have any social status as a white person, you pretty much have to hate your own people and preach the narrative. You're especially not allowed to speak up for your own people by name or lose bank accounts, lose work, everything. This is where we're at. Because remember, the Republican Party never wanted us. They were stuck with us. We have zero representation, and this is why. We don't even have our own ethnic identity for the fear of our own American ethnic identity as the founding people, for fear of offending anybody else. And they have their own identity. We just can't have ours. We especially cannot speak up on behalf of ours. Well, that better change. Because there are no protests for her. There's no one speaking up for her. There's no outrage, moral outrage for her. And the 20,000 women that this happens to every year, just women, there's no outrage for any white kid in a rough neighborhood who gets jumped by entire mobs every day, who has stuff stolen, who has constantly assaulted. And then, by the way, blamed for it and deemed privileged. So every major institution, the news angle of every single news media, and then his own government names him, the white male, the ultimate target, their number one target and the number one threat. And by the way, this is what happens on the day-to-day. And going to get worse, and getting far worse. And Western people, the founding people of the Western nations, don't even have a right to speak up for their own people. And this happens, and there's no response. And they even bury and hide the demographics, just like they did in Waukesha. That needs to change. There should be mass demonstrations and peaceful protests across the country. There should be. We have to have representation. This garbage has got to stop. We should not have to live like this. We will not keep living like this. This is Ozark Hillman. Y'all have a good one.